Hey guys, so welcome back to today's video. Today's episode I'm going to be taking you through my interval session. So for those that sort of watched Monday's program, my sort of setup and the overview as I like to put together my training. Tuesdays I designate to interval. Today I'm going to be taking you through this. On the treadmill next to me is Jamie the Genius Spate. That was actually his name. So he's a 14-year pro boxer that's just retired. So really sort of established in the fight game. So he's going to be sort of coming under my wing and going through some training with me, and then he's going to be returning the favor on the pad. So yeah, really looking forward to that, getting in the ring with him and just learning some skills. So today he come through and did this with me. It's good to sort of still got some legs on him for a retiree. Yeah, so one of the things when I set up my training is that intervals are a mainstay, right? So the overview of the general approach to my training is we go from general to specific. So in your off season, it's more general, and what a general phase will look like for me is I will vary the distances, the rest periods, and again, just allow myself to get good at many different things. So today we're going 60 seconds on, 60 seconds off. So we're sort of keeping it around that sort of 400 meter mark, sort of per rep, a little bit shorter than that, depending on obviously how quick you're running it. But that's sort of going to be tapping into that sort of anaerobic lactate sort of system. We're sort of going to be working through the muscle glycogen sort of pathway, and the 60 seconds rest is incomplete. So what you'll see is a build up of fatigue over the 10 reps. That's ultimately what we're training, that ability to keep the heart rate down in those reps 5, 6, and 7, and 8, whilst obviously staying fresh in the beginning. So these aren't necessarily full tilt, they're hard work, but then get the good recovery. And again, if you were to want to buffer out the lactate completely, you'd want to be taking 4 minutes rest. So that's why if you've ever seen VO2 max intervals, it's generally 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off. So you can work as hard as you can for those 4 minutes, allow yourself to fully recover, and then go in. So you're really stretching your capacity, obviously tapping into that VO2 max, your top end. Obviously here, with incomplete recoveries, we can still work, but we're going to be accumulating fatigue. So there's going to be a limitation to how far we can stretch this and take this. Now we can play with this over time. So again, as I sort of mentioned in the general phase, I tend to work between sort of 60 seconds and 4 minutes, and we'll play around. So essentially, if you're on a track that's 400 meters ish and up to about 1K per effort, and just building up the capacity. The goal here is to never allow ourselves to stray too far from the path. So what I mean by that is, all that really happens if I sign up to a half marathon or a marathon is my intervals just become more specific to the challenge at hand. So my general off season is preparing me for the specific that will come inevitably, but it allows me a bit more freedom and to explore some less specific intervals and to really just train the body and make it fun, make it entertaining, create a challenge. Like next week, come back in, create a unique challenge, and you're just testing yourself, just allowing yourself to build, experience different rest ratios, different work ratios, and a lot of this is to figure out where you struggle. Where is your weakness in this? And for me, like, this is probably a little bit more towards the end of my wheelhouse, shorter work intervals and with rest every now and then. That I can almost do that indefinitely. It's only when I personally get into 2, 4, 8, sort of 12-minute work, that's not my wheelhouse. So we will be tapping into that over the coming weeks. But for now, I'm going to kind of enjoy the fact that I haven't got a race coming up, and I'm just going to sort of hit the intervals, maintain that leg speed, that cardiovascular fitness that allows me to sort of push myself into these intervals and then build from there. I think it's really important that I'm going to put a little chart on the screen here about the sort of different energy pathways and what fuel we're using when we do them. But one of the things I like to do is kind of cover all bases when it comes to my overall training, whether that's a week, every 2 weeks, or a month, is that to make sure that we're sort of tapping in. So obviously the 1 to 4 seconds, purely anaerobic, ATP stored in the muscles, that's going to be your explosive jumps, your max effort med ball throws that I like to do. So that's what's developing that pathway. My sort of 4 to 10 seconds is my sprints. So that's going to be your ATP and your creatine phosphate system, so making sure that we become good and efficient and well versed in these. I then sort of bypass that sort of 10 to 45 seconds. I will do that every now and then with 200s, but I don't spend too much time there. I find them, at least for me, to be really fatiguing. So I kind of like to spend a bit more time in that sort of 45 seconds all the way up to sort of 2 minutes 40 for my intervals, and then my pure aerobic training is going to be my long, slow cardio, right? So that's your zone 2 training, which I sort of said in Monday's video. I like to kind of get between 2 to 3 hours a week, 3 ideally, but obviously there's a lot of things we're trying to balance here, and you will get some zone 2 work even from some of your weight training, right? Some of the little conditioning blocks that we do, we will venture into zone 2 there. So I leave a little bit of buffering, so 2 hours of general cardio, so that's generally 1 hour on a Sunday or a weekend, building up to 90 minutes. I get at least 1 hour on a Thursday, so there's 2 hours to 2.5 hours, and then sometimes I like to throw in another 30 minutes, maybe it's on the bike or maybe it's a light little jog. So I like to kind of top up to about that 3 hour mark. But that, well, you can see from this chart, we're covering both ends of the spectrum. So when you're looking at your training, look at it in regards to this chart, like what are you doing explosively from that 1 to 10 second mark? That's your pure anaerobic, your ATP, your creatine phosphate system. Intervals for me are sort of that 45 seconds to 2 minutes to 240 seconds, so up to that sort of 4 minute mark. So that's going to be that sort of anaerobic, aerobic threshold, muscle glycogen, lactic acid, buffering, and then doing your pure aerobic work that is going to be just developing that engine and that capacity, that ability to sustain low levels of work for long periods of time. And that's something that I like to have, that from that top-down approach to how I look at my conditioning. So again, if we sort of go back to how I set my week up, is that Tuesdays are intervals, Thursdays are easy, right? Again, it can be on the bike. I use running, but you can, and I will use cycling if my legs are fatigued, so I can still get the work. It doesn't matter the modality. And then the same thing on the weekend. It's just more the longer duration stuff. So we're doing, and then I like to get my sprints in, obviously. So 1 to twice a week, doing that sort of 4 to 10 seconds of work. So giving you a little bit of an overview here. So again, on these intervals today, it wasn't full tilt. Again, we're getting incomplete recovery, and again, the heart rate data that I kind of had showed that, because you will accumulate more fatigue as the set goes on, and towards the back end, you're going to be working quite hard. So we started out on level 18 kilometers an hour for these on an incline of 0.5, just to give us a little bit of, so we're not sort of freewheeling at the top there. And yeah, we went through 10 reps, so 20 minutes of work. We did a little 20-minute warm-up, some running prep, some low-intensive jumps, and then we got into it. So yeah, we went through, and then we finished up on 21 kilometers, I think, for the last 1 or 2. So we allow ourselves to pace the first 5 or 6, get comfortable, and then start to build into it. We are going to be doing this interval session again next week with reduced rest, but that gives us a little bit of opportunity to feel out this, to dip our toe before we jump in, and then we'll build off that into next week, and then we'll kind of start to expand the work blocks here, you know. So we are going to be going for incomplete recoveries on this. Every now and then I will jump in a VO2 max session, which will have more complete recoveries, but I use that as more of a deload. So it's not technically a deload because you are working pretty damn hard, but you're going to get full recovery, allowing that lactate to buffer out the system so that we're not accumulating the fatigue. But here, this is all about lactate tolerance and our ability to function under increasing demands of fatigue. So hopefully you found this video useful. I think it's something that when you're looking at your conditioning program as an overview, again, whether or not you are a football player, rugby player, you know, you do want to have the ability to have short, sharp bursts, repeated running ability, which is ultimately fit team sports, sort of field football and rugby. And then you want to pair that with some high-end sprints, and then the slower, easier aerobic stuff. Again, for the heavier rugby guys of you out there, you might want to do the easy aerobic stuff on a bike. Again, it can be a little bit more fatiguing if you're over 100 kilos and trying to go for a jog. That's way more demand than it is for me. So again, it's understanding that this is very general in our approach. This is something that I would definitely try and put together for someone in their off season of football, rugby. So if you guys are listening out there, again, if you are playing sport and you do want someone to write your off season program, and like I sort of mentioned earlier this week, I will be opening up my books as of Monday. You'll be able to purchase the program on my website. I'll keep the links in there. But if you are interested in that, then feel free to reach out and get in there early. And I'll set that all up for you so we can get the ball rolling for when you finish your season. So hopefully you found today useful. Again, going over how I structure the conditioning stuff and showing you where I'm currently at in terms of my interval work, 60 seconds on, 60 seconds off times 10. Started at 18 kilometers an hour, rose it to 21. I actually don't know what these treadmills go up to. I'm quite looking forward. Hopefully, I think they might go up to 23K. So we'll see how fast we can kind of start moving here. Another thing that's worth mentioning as well, guys, is doing the intervals on a treadmill. So for me, I'm doing it because it's absolutely scorching outside. So the cost of doing that would be higher than doing it inside an air-conditioned room. But the treadmill is going to be way less taxing to the body. You're going to be way less taxing to your hamstrings, way less taxing to the overall system, but you're still getting the aerobic development. So it's not to say that you should do all of it on the treadmill, but I think there are benefits to it. I think if you'd have put a gun to my head 10 years ago, I'd have said there's no use in it, but actually I find it really good for leg turnover, and I find it really good for way of managing overall fatigue while still getting the training effect that we want, right? Which is essentially the aerobic demands, as long as some of the peripheral adaptations to this as well. So, but without some of the stress on the hamstrings. If I'm going out and I'm trying to run 18 to 20 kilometers an hour on the track, like my hamstrings are going to be fired at the end of that, you know, which is then not going to go well going into leg day the following day. So it's all about managing, right? It's like an orchestra. I always use that analogy. We're trying to balance everything and keep everything flowing in harmony, not allowing anything to get too out of whack, so that we can maintain the rhythm of training throughout the long term, right? So hopefully you found this useful, and if you have any questions, please let me know. But until then, I'll see you guys tomorrow.